In Oregon's Cascade Range, where glacial peaks pierce winter storms, some disappearances challenge everything we know about survival. At 11:47 p.m. on February 14, 2019, the emergency radio at Government Camp's Mountain Rescue Operations Center crackled to life with the words every rescuer dreads. Multiple avalanche, multiple victims, immediate response required. The Valentine's Day storm had been pummeling Mount Hood for 18 straight hours, dumping nearly 4 feet of new snow on an already unstable base layer. Rebecca Martinez was 3 hours into her shift as night coordinator when the cascade of emergency calls began flooding in. First came reports from the Palmer Glacier area, where a group of backcountry skiers had triggered a slide near the 8,500-foot elevation mark. Minutes later, Crater Rock climbing area reported another avalanche that had swept across a popular winter camping zone. Then came the call that made Martinez's blood run cold. A third slide had buried part of the access road to Timberline Lodge, trapping an unknown number of vehicles. Martinez, a 15-year veteran of mountain rescue operations, moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had coordinated dozens of similar emergencies. She immediately activated the multi-agency response protocol, dispatching teams from Clackamas County Mountain Rescue, Hood River Crag Rats, and Portland Mountain Rescue. Ski patrol units from Timberline and Mount Hood Meadows were placed on standby, while Oregon Army National Guard helicopters at Portland Air Base were alerted despite the severe weather conditions. By 12:20 a.m., Martinez had deployed 6 separate rescue teams across the mountain's treacherous terrain. Her voice, calm and authoritative, cut through the static as she coordinated search sectors and equipment distribution. Team Alpha, you have the Palmer approach from the east. Team Beta, take the Crater Rock access from Government Camp. Weather window looks like maybe 40 minutes before the next band hits. The rescue center, normally quiet during night shifts, had transformed into a hub of controlled activity. Radio chatter filled the air as teams reported their positions and progress. Martinez tracked each unit on a large topographical map, using different colored pins to mark search areas, avalanche zones, and potential victim locations. Her movements were precise, methodical, the result of countless hours training for exactly this scenario. At 1:15 a.m., Martinez received confirmation that Team Alpha had reached the first slide zone. 3 victims had been located and were being extracted. Team Beta reported negative contact at Crater Rock, but had found equipment scattered by the avalanche. The third team was still en route to the road closure site, fighting through whiteout conditions and winds gusting over 60 miles per hour. Then, at 1:43 a.m., Martinez made her final radio transmission. Base to all units, I am showing anomalous beacon readings on the north face. Multiple signals in areas we have not deployed to. I am going to investigate these readings personally. Something's not right here. The radio fell silent. For the next 20 minutes, teams in the field attempted to raise Martinez on multiple channels. Standard protocol required the coordinator to remain at base camp during active operations, monitoring all units and maintain communication with outside agencies. Martinez had never deviated from protocol in 15 years of service. She had trained dozens of other coordinators on the critical importance of maintaining central command during emergency operations. Yet her radio remained silent, and her position at the operations center sat empty. The topographical map still spread across the table with her handwritten notes documenting each team's progress. Her coffee cup was still warm. When Rebecca Martinez failed to respond to radio calls for 30 minutes, Deputy Commander Jake Morrison made the decision that would haunt him for months. He initiated Protocol 7, the emergency procedure for locating missing rescue personnel. The bitter irony was not lost on anyone. They would use Martinez's own search protocols, methods she had developed and refined over years of successful mountain rescues, to try to find her. Morrison immediately recalled Team Charlie from the road closure site and redirected them to begin searching for Martinez. Her last known position was the Government Camp Operations Center, but the anomalous beacon readings she had mentioned suggested she had detected signals somewhere on the mountain's north face, a particularly dangerous area during avalanche conditions. The first clue emerged at 3:20 a.m., When Team Charlie discovered Martinez's snowmobile, approximately 2 miles northeast of Government Camp, near the base of Crater Rock. The machine was still running, its headlight cutting through the swirling snow, fuel tank nearly full. Her helmet sat on the seat, secured but not worn. Most troubling was what they found in the snow beside the vehicle, a complete set of tracks leading away from the snowmobile toward the steeper terrain above. According to the incident report filed by Team Charlie leader David Chen, the tracks were consistent with Martinez's boot size and tread pattern. They appeared deliberate, not erratic or indicative of someone lost or disoriented. The stride length and direction suggested she knew exactly where she was going, Chen would later tell investigators. These were not the tracks of someone in distress. The team followed the tracks for approximately 300 yards before they vanished at a rocky outcropping where the wind had scoured the snow down to bare rock. Beyond that point, the terrain dropped away into a series of steep gullies and cliff faces that would be treacherous even for an experienced mountaineer in good weather. At 4:45 a.m., rescue teams made another disturbing discovery. Martinez's personal avalanche beacon was transmitting. Advanced avalanche transceivers can detect buried victims at distances up to 80 meters, and Martinez carried the latest technology, a device she had personally field-tested for the manufacturer. Her beacon should have made locating her straightforward, but the signal was moving. Team Alpha's report, filed at 5:10 a.m., documented beacon readings that placed Martinez's location at an elevation of 7,800 feet on the mountain's northeast slope. 30 minutes later, Team Beta detected the same beacon signature nearly a quarter-mile away at 8,200 feet. Either Martinez was moving rapidly across extremely difficult terrain in near-zero visibility, or something was wrong with the equipment. Technical specialist Maria Santos, called in from Portland Mountain Rescue, brought additional beacon tracking equipment to isolate the source of the signal confusion. Santos had worked with Martinez on developing improved avalanche victim location protocols and knew her equipment intimately. Rebecca's beacon was transmitting perfectly, Santos later reported. Strong signal, clear identification code, proper battery levels. But the GPS coordinates we were getting were impossible given the terrain and weather conditions. At 6:30 a.m., as the first gray light of dawn began to penetrate the storm clouds, teams made their most significant discovery: Martinez's rescue pack. The bright orange pack, standard issue for all rescue coordinators, was found carefully placed on a large boulder near the tree line at 8,000 feet elevation. Not dropped, not scattered by wind or avalanche, but deliberately placed. Inside the pack, rescue teams found all of Martinez's essential survival equipment: extra clothing, emergency shelter, food rations, medical supplies, backup radio, and additional beacon batteries. For someone of Martinez's experience, abandoning this equipment in severe weather conditions would be tantamount to suicide. She had trained hundreds of volunteers on the absolute necessity of maintaining survival gear in alpine emergencies. Rebecca wrote the book on winter survival protocols, Morrison told investigators during his formal statement. She would never, under any circumstances, separate herself from that pack unless she was physically unable to carry it. And if that was the case, we would have found signs of injury or struggle. Instead, everything was neatly organized as if she intended to return for it. More puzzling was what was not in the pack: Martinez's personal GPS unit, her backup radio batteries, and her emergency bivy sack were all missing. Someone had selectively removed specific items while leaving others behind. Either Martinez had taken only what she needed for a short reconnaissance mission, or someone else had gone through her equipment. By 8:00 a.m., with daylight improving visibility, helicopter support finally became possible. Oregon Army National Guard crews conducted aerial sweeps of the areas where beacon signals had been detected, focusing on the terrain between Martinez's abandoned snowmobile and the location of her rescue pack. Despite clear views of the search area, no sign of Martinez was spotted from the air. The beacon signal continued transmitting throughout the morning, but its location remained inconsistent with the laws of physics. At one point, tracking equipment showed the signal coming from inside a known glacier crevasse that would be impossible for anyone to survive. An hour later, the same beacon appeared to be transmitting from a cliff face that even experienced technical climbers would find challenging. By noon on February 15th, 12 hours after Martinez's disappearance, rescue teams had covered nearly 15 square miles of some of Mount Hood's most treacherous terrain. They had found her transportation, her helmet, her survival equipment, and her beacon signal. But Rebecca Martinez herself remained missing, somewhere in the mountain's frozen wilderness, leaving behind only questions and the haunting memory of her final radio transmission about mysterious beacon readings that no one else had detected. To understand why Rebecca Martinez's disappearance sent shockwaves through the Pacific Northwest mountain rescue community, you have to understand who she was in that world. In 15 years of active service, Martinez had coordinated 247 successful rescue operations without losing a single victim. Her colleagues called her the calculator for her methodical approach to risk assessment and resource allocation. She was the person other rescue coordinators called when they faced impossible situations. Martinez began her mountain rescue career in 2004 as a volunteer with Portland Mountain Rescue after moving to Oregon from Colorado, where she had worked as a paramedic in the ski towns around Val. Her medical background, combined with her technical climbing skills, made her an immediate asset to the team. But it was her analytical mind and natural leadership abilities that set her apart from other rescuers. Rebecca could look at a topographical map and tell you not just where someone was likely to be found, but how long it would take to get them out and what equipment you would need, recalled Tom Bradley, who worked with Martinez for over a decade. She had this ability to see the whole operation like a chess game, thinking 3 moves ahead while the rest of us were still figuring out the first move. By 2010, Martinez had developed what became known as the Martinez method for avalanche victim recovery. Her system integrated traditional beacon searching with advanced GPS tracking and predictive modeling based on terrain analysis. The technique reduced average victim location time by 35% and had been adopted by rescue organizations throughout the Cascade Range. She had personally trained over 150 rescue volunteers in the method, traveling to mountain communities from British Columbia to Northern California. Martinez's expertise extended beyond field operations into the technical side of rescue equipment. She had collaborated with manufacturers to develop improved avalanche beacons, cold weather communication devices, and lightweight shelter systems. Her input had influenced the design of equipment used by rescue teams across North America. 3 patents bore her name, including one for a GPS-integrated beacon system that could transmit location data even when buried under snow. But in the months leading up to her disappearance, Martinez had become increasingly concerned about changes in the mountain rescue system. Budget cuts at the state and federal level had reduced funding for equipment maintenance and volunteer training. More troubling to Martinez were irregularities she had noticed in rescue equipment procurement contracts. According to documents later obtained by investigators, Martinez had been quietly documenting instances where rescue teams received equipment that didn't meet specified standards. Radio batteries that failed in cold weather, beacon devices with shortened range capabilities, emergency shelter materials that degraded rapidly under field conditions. Her personal files contained detailed technical analyses of failed equipment, complete with manufacturer specifications and field performance data. Deputy Commander Morrison, who had worked closely with Martinez on equipment procurement, confirmed her concerns. Rebecca was meticulous about gear reliability, he told investigators. She kept detailed logs of every piece of equipment failure, every malfunction, every instance where substandard gear put rescuers or victims at risk. She was building a case that someone was cutting corners on safety equipment to increase profit margins. The financial stakes were significant. Government contracts for mountain rescue equipment in Oregon alone totaled over $230 million annually, with federal grants adding another $800,000. If Martinez could prove that contractors were supplying substandard equipment while charging premium prices, the legal and financial consequences would be substantial. 3 weeks before her disappearance, Martinez had attended a contentious meeting with state emergency management officials regarding proposed changes to rescue protocols. The new procedures would have reduced equipment testing requirements and extended replacement intervals for critical safety gear. According to meeting minutes, Martinez had strongly opposed the changes, presenting data showing increased equipment failure rates under the proposed standards. She was passionate about it, recalled meeting attendee Dr. Sarah Chen from the Oregon Office of Emergency Management. Rebecca had charts, graphs, failure analysis reports. She argued that cutting equipment standards would eventually cost lives. She was pretty vocal about holding contractors accountable for providing gear that met specifications. Martinez had also been investigating connections between equipment suppliers and state procurement officials. Her personal notes, discovered during the search of her apartment, contained names, dates, and financial relationships that suggested potential conflicts of interest in the contracting process. She had been preparing to present her findings to federal oversight authorities. The tight-knit mountain rescue community operated on trust, mutual dependence, and shared commitment to saving lives. Rescue coordinators like Martinez held positions of enormous responsibility, making life and death decisions about resource allocation and risk assessment. Their expertise was respected by law enforcement, emergency management agencies, and volunteer organizations throughout the region. But this same community culture that celebrated Martinez's expertise also made it difficult for outsiders to penetrate when questions arose about her disappearance. Mountain rescue volunteers, who often risked their lives alongside each other, developed fierce loyalty bonds. They protected their own, sometimes even from legitimate investigations. The mountain rescue world is small and tight, explained Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had studied emergency responder communities for the University of Oregon. When someone like Rebecca Martinez goes missing, especially under mysterious circumstances, the community tends to close ranks. They are more likely to trust each other than outside investigators, even when those investigators are trying to help. This community dynamic would prove significant as the investigation into Martinez's disappearance deepened. The very people who knew her best, who understood her capabilities and motivations most clearly, would also be the most reluctant to share information with authorities. They operated by their own code, one that valued loyalty above transparency. And Rebecca Martinez, the calculator who never lost a victim, had become their greatest mystery. 3 days after Rebecca Martinez's disappearance, audio technicians from the Oregon State Police Crime Lab made a discovery that would transform the investigation from a straightforward search and rescue operation into something far more complex. While analyzing Martinez's final radio transmission, the one where she mentioned anomalous beacon readings, they detected something that rescue teams had missed in the chaos of that night: background voices. Using specialized filtering software typically reserved for wiretap investigations, technicians isolated faint audio signatures beneath Martinez's transmission. The voices were speaking in technical jargon, discussing GPS coordinates and equipment specifications. Most significantly, one voice could be heard saying, "The readings are confirmed. Package is in position." The transmission lasted only 43 seconds, but those background voices suggested Martinez was not alone when she made her final radio call. The audio quality was poor due to weather interference, but we could clearly identify at least 2 distinct voices in addition to Martinez's, reported lead technician Robert Kim in his analysis summary. The speakers appeared to be using technical rescue terminology, but they were not on any official rescue frequency. This suggests they were communicating through equipment not part of the authorized emergency response. Even more puzzling were the technical anomalies surrounding Martinez's equipment data. Her GPS tracker, which automatically logged position information every 30 seconds, showed readings that defied explanation. At 1:47 a.m., 4 minutes after her final radio transmission, her GPS unit recorded an elevation of 12,240 feet. Mount Hood's summit reaches 11,249 feet. Either her equipment had malfunctioned catastrophically, or the GPS data had been somehow manipulated. Dr. Amanda Foster, a GPS technology specialist consulted by investigators, found the elevation readings particularly troubling. Modern GPS units, especially the military-grade equipment used by rescue coordinators, are accurate to within 3 meters under normal conditions, Foster explained. Even accounting for atmospheric interference from the storm, we should not see elevation errors of nearly 1,000 feet. This suggests either severe equipment failure or deliberate signal manipulation. The GPS anomalies created timeline problems that investigators struggled to resolve. Martinez's tracker showed her moving at speeds up to 85 miles per hour across terrain, where even snowmobiles would be limited to 15-20 mph. At one point, the data suggested she had traveled 2.3 miles in 4 minutes while gaining 800 feet of elevation through an area known to contain near vertical cliff faces. Either Rebecca Martinez had developed the ability to fly, or someone was feeding false data into her GPS system, noted Detective Lisa Park from the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, who had taken over the investigation from rescue teams. The technical evidence was pointing toward deliberate manipulation of her tracking equipment. Competing theories began emerging within the rescue community. The official search and rescue position, supported by Deputy Commander Morrison and most volunteer teams, maintained that Martinez had encountered equipment failure during severe weather conditions and had become separated from her gear while attempting to investigate beacon readings that turned out to be false signals caused by the storm. But a second theory, quietly discussed among technical rescue specialists, suggested something more deliberate. Martinez's methodical approach to equipment procurement investigations had made her enemies among contractors and potentially within state government agencies. Her disappearance could have been orchestrated to silence her before she could present her findings to federal authorities. The technical evidence seemed to support this second theory. On February 18th, investigators discovered that Martinez's personal laptop had been remotely accessed 3 times since her disappearance. The access attempts occurred at 2:15 a.m., 4:30 a.m., and 6:45 a.m. on February 16th, approximately 24 hours after she went missing. Someone with sophisticated technical capabilities had been trying to access her equipment procurement files. Cybersecurity expert David Chen, hired by Martinez's family to examine her digital evidence, found traces of professional-grade intrusion attempts. This was not some amateur hacker trying to steal personal information, Chen reported. The access attempts used advanced penetration techniques consistent with corporate or government intelligence capabilities. Someone was specifically looking for Rebecca's research files. The breakthrough came on February 19th when Forest Service rangers discovered helicopter landing sites in 2 remote areas of Mount Hood National Forest. The sites, located approximately 3.2 and 4.7 miles from Martinez's last known position, showed evidence of recent use. Snow compression patterns indicated a medium-sized helicopter had landed at both locations sometime during the storm period. Neither landing site appeared on any official flight logs for February 14th-15th. The Federal Aviation Administration reported no authorized aircraft operations in the Mount Hood area during the storm, when visibility and wind conditions made flying extremely dangerous. Yet the physical evidence clearly showed helicopter activity during the time period when Martinez disappeared. Professional helicopter operations leave distinctive patterns in snow and vegetation, explained Forest Service investigator Michael Torres. These sites showed rotor wash signatures, skid impressions, and ground compression consistent with a Bell 206 or similar light utility helicopter. The timing of the landings, based on snow accumulation patterns, placed them within hours of Martinez's disappearance. The helicopter evidence shifted the investigation toward scenarios involving external actors with significant resources and capabilities. Few organizations had access to helicopters willing to operate in severe weather conditions during nighttime hours. The list included law enforcement agencies, military units, emergency medical services, and private contractors with specialized capabilities. But the helicopter landings raised as many questions as they answered. If Martinez had been extracted by helicopter, why had her beacon continued transmitting for days afterward? If the helicopter operations were legitimate emergency response, why were not they documented in official flight logs? And if they were part of some effort to silence Martinez, Why leave such obvious physical evidence? Detective Park summarized the investigation's central dilemma in her February 20th report. We have technical evidence suggesting equipment manipulation, audio evidence indicating Rebecca Martinez was not alone during her final transmission, GPS data showing impossible movements, and physical evidence of undocumented helicopter operations. Each piece of evidence is credible individually, but the signal anomalies continued. Martinez's beacon still transmitted daily, but from locations that changed in ways that made no geographical sense. The signal had been detected from inside known glacier crevices, from cliff faces accessible only to technical climbers, and from elevations that exceeded the mountain's actual height. Someone, or something, was playing games with the very technology Martinez had helped develop to save lives in the mountains she loved. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been forecasting avalanche conditions in the Cascades for 18 years. From her office in the Mount Hood National Forest headquarters, she monitored weather patterns, snowpack stability, and backcountry conditions across hundreds of square miles of mountainous terrain. On February 20th, 6 days after Rebecca Martinez's disappearance, Vasquez received a call from federal investigators. What she told them would fundamentally change the direction of the investigation. According to Vasquez, Martinez had contacted her office multiple times in the weeks leading up to the storm. The calls were not unusual in themselves. Rescue coordinators regularly consulted with avalanche forecasters before deploying teams. But Martinez's questions had been different. She was not asking about current conditions. She was asking about discrepancies in official safety assessments. Rebecca had been comparing our forecasts with the safety reports filed by private contractors, Vasquez later explained to investigators. She'd noticed patterns that concerned her. Areas we'd rated as high risk were being cleared for equipment staging by third-party safety consultants. The contractors in question worked for Mountain Vista Solutions, a company that provided safety assessments for ski resort operations and rescue equipment suppliers. According to Forest Service procurement records, Mountain Vista had been awarded several lucrative contracts over the past 2 years, including one for evaluating avalanche beacon technology, the same technology Martinez had helped develop. When investigators contacted Mountain Vista's regional director, James Kellerman, he denied any knowledge of Martinez's concerns. Our safety protocols meet or exceed all federal standards, Kellerman stated in a written response. We have never had any communication with Coordinator Martinez regarding our assessment procedures. But phone records told a different story. Martinez had called Mountain Vista's main office 4 times in January. Each call lasted between 15 and 25 minutes. When pressed about these calls, Kellerman's attorney issued a statement claiming client-contractor privilege prevented disclosure of any conversations. The investigation took another turn when investigators discovered that Martinez had been documenting equipment failures during recent rescue operations. Her personal files, recovered from her home computer, contained detailed records of beacon malfunctions, equipment delays, and safety protocol violations. One entry dated February 1st was particularly damning. 3rd malfunction this month. New beacons failing and extreme cold. Contractor claims user error, but I have tested the units myself. Ski resort management at Timberline Lodge maintained they had no knowledge of Martinez's equipment concerns. Resort Safety Director Patricia Wong stated that all rescue equipment underwent regular inspection and met manufacturer specifications. We work closely with rescue coordinators to ensure the safety of our guests and staff, Wong said. If Coordinator Martinez had safety concerns, we would have addressed them immediately. But anonymous sources within the mountain rescue community painted a different picture. According to one veteran rescue volunteer who spoke on condition of anonymity, Martinez had been increasingly frustrated with what she saw as cost-cutting measures that compromised safety. She'd been fighting for equipment upgrades for months, the source revealed. Every time she raised concerns, she was told the budget would not allow for changes. The situation became more complex when federal investigators from the Office of Inspector General arrived at government camp on February 22nd. Their presence suggested that Martinez's disappearance might be connected to broader concerns about federal contracting practices. The investigators, who declined to comment on their ongoing work, began examining procurement records for rescue equipment purchases dating back 3 years. Local rescue volunteers watched these developments with growing unease. Martinez had been more than just a coordinator. She had been a trusted leader who put safety above all other considerations. The possibility that her disappearance might be connected to corruption in the rescue equipment industry struck at the heart of their professional identity. Rebecca would never have stayed quiet about safety problems, explained rescue volunteer Tom Morrison. If she thought lives were at risk, she would have kept pushing until someone listened. That is just who she was. As investigators dug deeper into the procurement records, they discovered a troubling pattern. Several equipment purchases had been fast-tracked through the approval process, bypassing normal safety review procedures. The approvals had come from supervisors who rarely dealt with field operations and might not have understood the technical implications of their decisions. Meanwhile, the search for Martinez continued in increasingly dangerous conditions. High winds and fresh snowfall had created new avalanche hazards across the mountain, forcing search teams to operate in areas that would normally be considered too risky. The irony was lost on no one. They were risking their lives to find someone who had disappeared while trying to keep them safe. Dr. Vasquez's testimony provided crucial context for understanding Martinez's final weeks. She was methodical in her approach to everything, including this investigation, Vasquez told federal agents. Rebecca was not making wild accusations. She had documentation, she had evidence, and she was building a case that could have exposed systemic problems in how we evaluate and procure safety equipment. The avalanche forecaster's insights painted a picture of Martinez as someone who had discovered something significant enough to put her own safety at risk. Whether that discovery had led to her disappearance, either through accident or design, remained the central question haunting investigators as February gave way to March, and the mountain continued to guard its secrets. In the mountain rescue community, loyalty runs deeper than professional obligation. These men and women risked their lives together in conditions that would terrify most people, creating bonds that transcend normal workplace relationships. When one of their own disappears, especially under suspicious circumstances, that loyalty becomes fierce and protective. By February 25th, 2 weeks after Martinez's disappearance, the official search had been scaled back due to dangerous weather conditions. But the rescue volunteers had no intention of giving up. Led by veteran climber and rescue specialist David Chen, they organized independent search efforts that operated outside official channels. The bureaucrats can make their rules, Chen told a gathering of 30 volunteers at the government camp fire station. But Rebecca is family. We do not abandon family. These unofficial searches focused on areas that formal teams could not access safely. Using their own equipment and accepting full personal liability, the volunteers pushed into terrain that would have been off-limits to official rescue operations. They rappelled into crevices, traversed unstable snow bridges, and climbed ice walls in their determination to find Martinez. What they discovered during these searches would remain largely hidden from official investigators for months to come. On February 27th, volunteer searcher Maria Santos found something that changed everything. A small digital recording device, carefully wrapped in waterproof material and hidden beneath a cairn of rocks near Crater Rock. The device contained over 3 hours of audio recordings apparently made by Martinez in the weeks before her disappearance. Santos faced a crucial decision. Official protocol required that any evidence be turned over to investigators immediately. But the rescue community had grown deeply suspicious of outside authorities, particularly after federal investigators had begun questioning long-standing rescue procedures and relationships. Instead of reporting the find immediately, Santos brought the device to an emergency meeting of senior rescue volunteers. What they heard in those recordings convinced them that Martinez had indeed been in danger, and that turning the evidence over to authorities might put other lives at risk. The recordings revealed Martinez conducting covert investigations into safety violations by equipment contractors. She had secretly recorded conversations with company representatives, documented equipment failures that had been covered up, and gathered evidence of fraudulent safety certifications. Most disturbing were recordings of heated arguments between Martinez and unnamed supervisors who had pressured her to approve equipment that she knew was defective. In one particularly chilling exchange, recorded just 5 days before her disappearance, Martinez could be heard saying, "I will not sign off on equipment that could kill people. I do not care what kind of pressure you are getting from above. My name goes on these reports, and I will not be responsible for a preventable death." The voice responding to her was disguised or distorted, but the threat was clear. "You need to be very careful about making accusations you cannot prove, Rebecca. There is more at stake here than you understand." Faced with this evidence, the rescue volunteers made a decision that would define their response to the investigation. They would protect Martinez's work by protecting her evidence. The recordings were copied and hidden in multiple secure locations known only to senior community members. The original device was ultimately turned over to investigators, but only after several days of careful consideration, and after the most sensitive recordings had been removed. This decision created a wall of silence that frustrated official investigators. When federal agents attempted to interview rescue volunteers, they encountered polite but firm non-cooperation. Volunteers would answer direct questions about search procedures and safety protocols, but offered no volunteer information about Martinez's personal concerns or activities. It became clear that the mountain rescue community was operating by its own rules, noted FBI Special Agent Patricia Coleman, who joined the investigation in early March. They were courteous and professional, but they were protecting something, or someone. The protective instinct extended beyond the volunteer community. Local businesses that supplied rescue operations, from equipment retailers to helicopter services, also closed ranks. When investigators attempted to examine purchase records or flight logs, they encountered legal challenges and administrative delays that slowed the investigation to a crawl. Anonymous tips began reaching news outlets and investigative agencies, but these communications were carefully crafted to protect sources while advancing Martinez's safety concerns. Someone, or multiple someones, with detailed knowledge of the procurement corruption was feeding information to journalists and federal oversight agencies, but always through channels that could not be traced back to individual rescue volunteers. One such tip, received by the Portland Oregonian on March 5th, included detailed documentation of equipment failures that had been covered up by Mountain Vista Solutions. The information was too specific and too well documented to ignore, but the source remained completely anonymous despite intensive efforts to identify them. As March progressed, bringing slightly warmer weather and renewed official search efforts, the mountain rescue community maintained its protective silence. They continued their own search operations, shared resources and information among themselves, and stonewalled outside investigators with polite but absolute determination. "They were protecting Rebecca even though she was gone," observed Dr. Sarah Kim, a psychologist who specializes in tight-knit professional communities. "They believed that completing her work, exposing the safety violations she had died trying to reveal, was the best way to honor her memory and protect future lives." The question that haunted investigators was simple but profound. Was the rescue community protecting evidence of what had happened to Martinez, or were they protecting Martinez herself? Had she disappeared to escape threats to her safety, and was the mountain rescue community helping her stay hidden until she could safely expose the corruption she had discovered? Deputy Commander Morrison, caught between his loyalty to Martinez and his duty as a law enforcement officer, struggled with the community's response. "I understand why they are doing this," he confided to Detective Park during one particularly frustrating interview session. "Rebecca meant everything to these people. But if she is out there somewhere, if she is alive, we need to know." As winter slowly gave way to spring on Mount Hood, that question remained unanswered. The mountain kept its secrets, and so did the people who knew it best. The rescue community had chosen their own form of mountain justice, one that prioritized protecting their own over cooperating with outsiders, no matter how well-intentioned those outsiders might be. On March 15th, exactly 5 weeks after Rebecca Martinez had vanished into the storm, her personal avalanche beacon was finally located. The discovery came not from official search teams or volunteer rescue efforts, but from a routine glacier monitoring expedition conducted by Portland State University researchers studying ice movement on Palmer Glacier. Dr. Michael Chen was documenting changes in crevasse patterns when his team's avalanche safety equipment detected a persistent signal emanating from deep within the glacier. The signal was strong, consistent, and unmistakably matched the frequency of Martinez's personal beacon, a high-end unit with a unique identifier that she had helped design during her work with equipment manufacturers. The location of the signal presented an immediate mystery. Martinez's beacon was transmitting from a position approximately 200 feet below the glacier surface, in an area where the ice was compressed into an almost solid mass. According to glacier experts, reaching that depth would require specialized drilling equipment and weeks of careful excavation. More puzzling still, the area showed no signs of recent surface disturbance that might indicate where someone had fallen through. The signal was not coming from where someone would end up after an accidental fall, Dr. Chen later explained to investigators. It was coming from a location that suggested deliberate placement, but reaching that location would have required equipment and expertise that few people possess. Technical analysis of the beacon signal revealed additional anomalies. The device was not only intact and functional after 5 weeks in sub-zero conditions, but it was transmitting a data pattern that suggested it had been deliberately programmed with specific information. Modern avalanche beacons can store limited digital data for post-rescue analysis, and Martinez's device appeared to be broadcasting more than just its standard location signal. Attempting to retrieve the beacon for detailed analysis proved nearly impossible. The location was accessible only through a treacherous route, involving rappelling into crevasse systems that glaciologists deemed extremely unstable. Any attempt to reach the beacon would require closing the entire area to rescue training operations and potentially triggering controlled avalanches to ensure excavation safety. After extensive consultation with glacier experts and structural engineers, authorities made the difficult decision that attempting recovery would pose unacceptable risks to search personnel. The beacon would remain where it was, transmitting its mysterious signal from within the ancient ice. This decision sparked intense debate within the mountain rescue community. Some argued that leaving Martinez's beacon unrecovered was tantamount to abandoning her. Others contended that risking additional lives to retrieve a device from an impossible location was exactly the kind of decision Martinez herself would have opposed. Rebecca was always about calculated risks, explained rescue veteran Tom Morrison. She would never have wanted people to die trying to recover a piece of equipment, even her own equipment. The question is, how did it get where it is? Investigators compiled 3 primary theories about Martinez's disappearance, each supported by some evidence but contradicted by others. The official position, maintained by the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, suggested that Martinez had become disoriented during the storm and suffered a fatal accident. Her beacon had somehow been separated from her body and carried by ice movement to its current location. This explanation satisfied no one who knew Martinez's expertise and experience. Rescue volunteers and fellow coordinators considered it impossible that someone with her mountain skills would become fatally lost in terrain she knew intimately, even in severe weather conditions. The second theory, favored by federal investigators examining procurement corruption, proposed that Martinez had been killed or forced to disappear because of her investigation into equipment safety violations. The beacon's impossible location was seen as evidence of deliberate placement, designed to prevent recovery of whatever data it contained about the corruption she had uncovered. This theory gained credibility when Mountain Vista Solutions abruptly lost several federal contracts in late March, amid allegations of falsified safety certifications. Company executives declined to comment on any connection to Martinez's investigation, but the timing suggested that her work had exposed significant problems in equipment procurement processes. The third theory, whispered among rescue volunteers but never officially articulated, was that Martinez had discovered her life was in danger and had staged her own disappearance. According to this scenario, she was alive but hidden, waiting for a safe opportunity to expose the corruption she had documented. The beacon placement was seen as a message, proof that she was still alive and in control of the situation. Supporting this theory were reports of someone matching Martinez's description seen at various locations throughout the Pacific Northwest in the months following her disappearance. None of these sightings could be confirmed, but they occurred in places where someone with Martinez's skills and connections might find temporary refuge. As summer arrived and snow levels receded on Mount Hood, rescue operations returned to normal patterns. New equipment was installed, new safety protocols were implemented, and federal oversight of procurement processes was strengthened. Whether these changes represented Martinez's posthumous victory or evidence of ongoing efforts to address the problems she had identified remained unclear. The beacon continued transmitting from within Palmer Glacier, its signal growing gradually weaker as battery power diminished. By late summer, the signal was detectable only with specialized equipment, and by winter, it had fallen silent entirely. Today, Mount Hood's rescue operations continue under new leadership and with improved safety standards. The corruption that Martinez had been investigating was largely eliminated through federal intervention and industry reforms. Equipment failures are now reported and investigated rather than covered up, and safety assessments are conducted by independent agencies rather than contractor employees. Whether Rebecca Martinez vanished while trying to expose these problems, or whether she succeeded in exposing them by disappearing, remains unknown. Her final radio transmission about anomalous beacon readings has never been fully explained. The helicopter landing sites were never connected to any official operation. The background voices on her final transmission were never identified. The mountain keeps its secrets, as it always has. But the legacy of her work, safer equipment, better oversight, and a rescue community that refuses to compromise on safety, suggests that some mysteries may be more important for what they change than for what they reveal. In the end, perhaps that is exactly what Rebecca Martinez, the calculator who never lost a victim, would have wanted. Somewhere in the ice and stone of Mount Hood, the truth remains buried. But the lives saved by the reforms her disappearance brought about may be the most fitting memorial to a woman who dedicated her life to bringing people home safely from the mountains. If this case stays with you, you're not alone. Here at Unresolved America, we cover cases like this every single day. Stories that deserve to be remembered, questions that refuse to fade. If you want to keep these investigations alive, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Drop a like if this story moved you, and leave a comment telling us which detail haunts you most. Until tomorrow, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop asking questions.